This is Signal and Noise, bringing clarity to data, tech, and AI.
Rio Longacre here for Signal and Noise, day number 1 for Possible. Here with a special guest, Erez Levin from Emin Advisory. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Rio.
So I know you came here to talk about quality, didn't you?
How'd you know?
Well, your reputation precedes you, and the other episode we did together did real well. We got a lot of good feedback about your discussion about quality and outcomes and all that. So maybe let's start there. Like, why is quality? Why are you so doggedly pursuing quality? Why does it matter? And why should people care?
I think the story is, for those that don't know, I spent most of my career at Google. I was there for 13 years. And what I really saw was sort of that race to the bottom for the industry. And it wasn't just on price, it was on quality as well. And what that ultimately, the reason for all of that was buyers just didn't care that much. They didn't insert the quality controls. They started chasing cookies and users and attribution and kind of ignored the media quality that plays a really important role in also driving marketing effectiveness.
Do you think brands care? Do you think buyers care? I know that's a loaded question.
It's tough because it's not a clear yes, no. There's generally no binaries in this world. There are buyers that care. They are, I would say, the minority. Many will say they care. How many have actually put those things into practice? They're in the minority, but I do think that most enterprise buyers, as they learn and they understand that their money is going, not just the amount of money that's going towards lower quality media, but that they're overpaying for that. That's when they become aware and realize that so MFA is a perfect example. Do buyers care about MFA? I mean, I think they should. And the outrage that you see on the internet makes you think that they do. Whether they've done anything about it, what they've done that's actually systemic and sustainable, those are sort of open-ended. We don't know yet exactly if we've solved MFA or we've sort of pushed it.
MFA is an interesting one because I remember, like, with clients, they would tell you they don't want MFA, but if you pull out all the MFA sites, CPMs, they go up, right? I mean, just naturally, because you're paying low CPMs for inventory, right? So I always thought that was an interesting, like, if you really care, you should be willing to pay more for quality, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the story. There's definitely the paying for quality. It's moving away from cost and thinking about value. And I think one of the important stories, a narrative that I talk about a lot, is it's not just, I don't think low quality media is bad, right? You just have to pay the right amount for it. And the question is, how much of your budget is also that you're signing towards this low quality media? Can you be effective if you're spending too much of your ads on MFA sites where there's 20 ads around it, or on CTV, you're spending 40% of your budget overnight? Can you be as effective? I'm not saying you shouldn't spend there, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, maybe it is worth the same, but it's probably worth less to you. And so it's more of that allocation of budget, and it's moving away from this concept of average CPMs, because that's really, I think, one of the biggest scourges. If you were to reallocate from a lower quality but cheaper media towards higher quality media, even if you kept everything at the same price, in theory, that would be a good thing, but your average CPMs would go up. And that's often what the procurement teams are looking at. And that's sort of that red flag that they see.
There's a time and a place maybe for low quality, low CPM, like within a brand's, let's say, media plan.
Absolutely. The concept is called the mere exposure effect. And so there's sort of a lot of research around this to show that just for Coca-Cola to serve you this tiny little ad that you see over and over again, that's enough for them to sort of be in the back of your mind, at least not top of mind, but back of your mind for when you're thirsty, you're going to think about their brand. And so there is value for that low quality media, but it has to be cheap enough to be worth it.
So it's like building the right plan to account for, okay, we're going to spend some on high CPM, high quality CTV. We're going to spend some on, let this low quality, long tail stuff that's going to be maybe more ubiquitous, but knowing what they're paying for and planning for that.
Yeah, and it is sort of campaign specific. And so that's easy for Coca-Cola because everyone knows their red iconic brand. They're going to buy it, everything else. But if you're a brand new marketer or a brand new product that needs to get out to market, the low quality media probably won't do the trick. You need to sort of like at least first get people to understand what your product is and who you are. And then you can do sort of more that like repetition through lower quality exposures just to make sure they're top of mind for when those people do enter the market.
What's the angle for publishers here? Because obviously focusing on quality, like as a former planner and buyer, I mean, in theory, it should be helping the premium publishers, right? Because there's a focus on quality and getting your ads in front of the right places with the right, the right publications with great content, with great audience data. I mean, that should be, I would think a focus on quality is going to be better for them, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been sort of screwed over in this sort of race to the bottom, and quality publishers probably more than anybody else. And so we've seen money move from where it should have gone, higher quality publishers, towards that sort of lower quality MFA. As buyers shift to higher quality, it's going to go towards publishers that have fewer ads on the page, that have more attentive audiences, maybe more loyal audiences, maybe audiences that have given them their data. And so they can use that as well to sort of make even more value out of the impressions that they have.
You've talked a lot in your writing about vanity metrics and how you don't like them. You think it's forced. I think the obsession with vanity metrics has made brands and made buyers focus on the wrong things. Can you explain that?
Yeah. We're in a very dynamic ecosystem. And so nothing is static, nothing remains good. When viewability first came out, it was a really valuable metric because it chopped off all of this inventory that wasn't valuable at all. And I wouldn't say it's a vanity metric entirely. It's not broadly, but in isolation, it's a vanity metric. It
So
doesn't.
visibility would be like one example.
It is an example. Yeah, completed views is another one, and that's the one that I think is a little bit easier to understand. When online video came out, most video ads were sort of the large, full screen, sound on ads, and so a completed view was a pretty good proxy that somebody watched it and was sort of attentive. When outstream video came along, and you had all these small muted video players playing on the bottom
below the fold or whatever, right?
they completed too, and so completed views, viewability, or completion rate, that became a vanity metric.
And it's easy to game, is your point.
It was gamed. Now, what I wouldn't throw that metric away. What I would say is you have to add other metrics on top. Quality needs to be multidimensional, and so just the fact that it completed is enough. Completed plus it was a large ad plus the sound was on. That's a really telling set of signals that tell you that that was of the highest quality of the type of ads you can get.
Turning to video, CTV, a lot of budget going. I think I was reading the other day it's going to grow 18% this year, which is pretty remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously traditional like linear television is shrinking, but CTV growing a lot. I think there was initially this perception that it was all high quality, the CPMs are higher, but there's been a lot. I think you talk about gaming and like there's been a lot of, I think, that especially in CTV, and there's been debates about what is real CTV inventory, in stream versus outstream. Like the viewers who are not deep in the space might not know a lot of these terms. Maybe you can just walk us through that real quick. Like what is real CTV inventory, in stream versus outstream, and like what do you consider quality?
Yeah, so I don't want to be the one to determine what is CTV, because I do think that it's a little bit in the eye of the beholder of the consumer and of the advertiser. So each one of them might decide that feels like CTV to me, and we should consider both of those. I think one of the issues we have is that we have like sort of this broad category, and so we do have a category problem with CTV and online video, where like who knows, they are these channels that are, as I tell it, they're not a monolith. There's really high quality. The most premium thing that you can think of is CTV and OLV. And then you have some of the lowest quality, some home screen, the small muted videos that are autoplay that also consider themselves in those categories. And so we have to think about what are those quality metrics that will determine the relative value of different impressions or different buckets of media within each of those channels.
We talked to Dr. Fu a couple of weeks ago on this pod, and his I even asked him like role of CTV in open web. And his opinion is CTV is not part of open web. It is a separate thing. And opinion on that, because it sounds like what you're saying is a lot of online video that just like maybe it is CTV, right? Even if it's not like on a premium, let's say it's not Amazon Prime Video, it's not Hulu, it's not like what we can definitely consider CTV. It sounds like you're saying there's a gray area of stuff that some brands, some advertisers may be fine with it and may consider it CTV.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be foolish for somebody to just, when you draw an arbitrary line, that's sort of the issue with the binaries. You're, first of all, too often valuing everything that's above that line as equal, but then you're saying everything below that line is worth zero. And that's not true. There is value even in those small little muted video ads. And so this is like moving away from binaries. On the sort of Dr. Fu comment, I disagree. I actually think it's more helpful to consider CTV as part of the open web. the way that I've looked at the open web, and I haven't seen this framing in a while that I put together, but it's this idea of like the openness of digitally transactable media. And so when there is a buying platform that is exclusively able to access certain content, what they own, right? Google, only Alphabet, their DSP can access YouTube. So YouTube is
operated inventory for
that
Google,
exactly
correct, yeah.
that and owned and operated, and it's exclusive to them. That's not the open web.
Like
So
Amazon
basically,
Video, for
yeah. So
example,
the
too.
walled gardens, and everything else is the open web. And so CTV should be part of the open web. We don't have to think about the open web as like, what's the browser, you know?
It's interesting. Fu was saying how he believes buyers should go to the platforms themselves. So go to Amazon DSP, go to, for Amazon Prime Video, go to DV360 for YouTube, go to, Hulu's platform for, he was saying, go to them. Buyers should go to them, not work through a DSP, buy direct. That was his whole thesis. I'd never heard that before.
Oh, it reminded me what he was saying that I've always been a fan of too. There is a very finite amount of human time and attention, but we have pretended like it is infinite because there are infinite number of impressions. You can always create.
Not human impressions necessarily.
Not necessarily human impressions, but maybe they are, but then there's 20 of them on a page. But the amount of time and attention that people can spend on any of those ads is finite. And so we've seen all of these things grow. The time and attention that people have and spend on this media has not necessarily grown. That imbalance of sort of supply and demand. And I believe when we finally recognize it as such, right, when people realize that they're buying 20 ads on a page instead of the one that they should be focusing on, when we deal with that supply scarcity that actually exists, the price is going to go way up because the demand is still going to be really high. So think about the most premium CTV, actual people watching sound on video. There's not that much.
There's only so much, right?
There's a limited amount. When buyers actually concentrate their demand there, the prices are going to go up, and most of that supply is not going to be transacted in this sort of programmatic DSP bid, at least not in a biddable, right? It's going to be a seller's market where they can say, hey, I've got something that almost nobody else has. I am going to keep it reserved because if you don't buy it from me upfront and a guaranteed and pay me the top dollar for it, somebody else will. The Super Bowl gets sold out every single year.
So looking at biddable versus non-biddable, I know in CTV now the majority is biddable, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. Not.
What is the split? You have any idea roughly?
Who was I listening to recently? It'll come to me. Tatari CEO. He was at Marketecture and he's been at a couple of other events. He's saying that the vast majority of what they're seeing, like 90% of CTV, is not transacted in a biddable way. It might be running through programmatic pipes, but it's not biddable. Like those are set guaranteed prices of how much is going to be filled. Maybe there's a little bit of intelligence of things moving around, a little bit of optimization, but it's not a per impression sort of priced media.
Right. There's no open exchange, or it's not. I mean, even some PMPs are still biddable too.
They're still a little bit biddable. I think most of it is it's closer to a reservation. It's closer to an IO deal. Maybe there's a little bit of intelligence.
That's like going back to the future, right? That's like how things used to be, right? When you're buying linear television, right? You're going to the upfronts. And I think up to 95% used to be transacted through upfronts. And there was a scatter market, which was more expensive, interestingly enough. It was not a race to the bottom. To your point, there was only limited inventory.
And that's the advantage to buyers that buy in advance, right? You're going to pay more to go into the scatter. And so you want to buy it, you want to reserve it, you want to hold on to it. That's how markets that are non-commoditized, right? You have a differentiated market and people will buy. There's always going to be buyers that want the best stuff and they're willing to pay more for it. They're going to pay a premium. They want that early access. And so that's what we need to sort of return to because we've treated media as this undifferentiated commodity. And now we're starting to realize there are qualitative differences. There's scarcity on the really good stuff. And that's going to be transacted differently than sort of what we had is that remnant programmatic space.
That's interesting. So it sounds like the thesis is saying, if you want quality, you should be able to understand the difference between quality and not quality, but also brands should be willing to pay for it. And they should understand there's a limited quality inventory. It should cost a premium and you should factor that into your media plan.
Yeah, that's the story. You have to factor that in. Don't pay for all media the same, right? It's not all created equal. And so once you have that basic premise, there's really small things to do. Like on CTV, the example of that I always show, most DSPs in that sort of programmatic or even non-programmatic, non-biddable environments, a lot of spend happens in the middle of the night, right? Because budgets need to get spent. And so they're spending 20, 30, 40% of those CTV budgets in the middle of the night.
And those are mostly not people watching, I'm guessing,
no,
correct?
no, they might be. CTV is a one-to-one, so it's a little bit different than linear TV. So I'm not saying it's worth zero. It's probably worth less, but the problem is that buyers are paying the same amount for every single hour of the day. So at 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. and 8 p.m., they're paying the same CPM, which doesn't compute for most advertisers. They know prime time, not only is it like more prime glamorous, but also there's probably more people in the room.
When you look at day parts, it would be different rates for normal television.
So it's a little bit different than linear, which isn't bought on a per impression basis. So I acknowledge it's probably not going to be a one-to-one match, but most advertisers would look at this and say, I don't want to spend 30% of my budget overnight, and I certainly don't want to pay the same CPMs at 2 a.m. as I would to reach a user who might just be more receptive to the message at 2 p.m. or 8 p.m., or there's going to be more people in the room. And so that little trick and that really like obvious example, I think, is enough to open people's eyes and say, oh, what other quality signals are we undervaluing?
So you've been on the quality bandwagon now for it's been at least a year, right?
It's been about 10 years.
10
but
years.
Yeah, like, I'm really up and at them for probably closer to 2, but it was attention for at least 5+ years before that.
Are you noticing a difference?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, people are talking about it more. I mean, the paper that I'm about to release now that was commissioned by STIM, the Coalition for Innovation and Media Measurement, that came about because they noticed everyone's talking about quality. It's the buzzword, but no one defined what it means. And it's hard to sort of like move together as an industry without this definition. So SIM decided we're going to move forward. We're going to help define what quality means. That really helps their constituents in the CTV world, both advertisers and publishers that have been a little bit stuck. In my opinion, was not the right approach to sort of make the fight about premium, right? As they're like, no, we're premium and we're better. I don't like premium particularly because this is another binary and it's still subjective. But then you say like, oh,
premium, you're what, right?
Exactly. And its quality is actually a little bit more granular. And so you can have high quality and medium quality and low quality is fine, but at the right price. And so it adds a little bit more of that granularity and the nuance that I think is needed to tell that story. Because if I'm looking at YouTube and I tell the story, like YouTube is gigantic and it has some really high quality stuff, right? Like no doubt about it.
You can find anything on YouTube. I mean, you can find some incredible content.
Incredible. And to the point, I think YouTube's still at, right? It's their like top 1%, 5%. Almost any single user and any single advertiser would look at that and say that is as high quality as any other media that I can possibly find. But that's their top 1 to 5%.
So their content is not that.
The vast majority, there's a lot of medium quality stuff, the stuff that we watch every day, but there's also people just playing music videos in the background on their TV. There's also lots of kids content, and now probably even more AI, whatever slop that's playing there. There's a lot of low quality stuff, which I'm not saying don't buy and don't pay any amount of money for. I'm just saying don't spend 30, 40% of your budget on that and be like, oh, this is my YouTube. That average CPM, the average completed view or whatever else that you're looking at, that is not telling the story. And, a little bit of a deviation, but just because they can do, and this applies to Amazon, this applies to everyone else, because you can do some attribution from video down to a search or to a purchase is not proof of the totality of the effectiveness. Even if you sort of ignore the fact that attribution can be gamed, it doesn't tell the full story of the short and long-term value of people being exposed to ads, remembering that brand, buying it later, sometimes in a way that you have no way to actually track and prove, or in a more of a probabilistic model where it's like, me and my wife, she saw the ad, I made the purchase, they're going to attribute that to my household, but I didn't see the ad. And so George Box was a famous mathematician. He has a famous quote. He said, all models are wrong, some are useful.
I like that.
It's a great quote. And I think that's sort of where we've gone wrong because our world has been modeled. We've pretended that
we're taking everything in these models, right?
Exactly. And we haven't sort of said, oh, well, they're not perfect. And so if you put that little margin of error, then you're forced to sort of prove it and triangulate and confirm it in different ways.
I think you hit on something important. I think a lot like marketing really is about, it's rare that there's a right or wrong answer. Okay, well, how right is this answer? How wrong is this answer or this approach? Let's try it out. Let's test it. I mean, I think and with these platforms, it's easy to test, but I think a lot of what happens now is, let's implement this and let's forget it, right? Because it's hard.
Yeah.
So maybe AI changes that.
Not fully. It might help in some ways, but it could hurt too, right? If the incentives aren't aligned and then we're still measuring things, assigning too much certainty to those models, that could be really detrimental. And so it really depends on what checks we have. The one thing, sort of going back to your point earlier, saying we're going back in time. I talk about the quality controls that we had in the broadcast era, and there were multiple quality controls, but ultimately maybe the most important one is that we knew that there was no deterministic 100% certainty. Everything was probabilistic. Everything was statistically significant. We looked at the short and the long term. It wasn't 100% perfectly effective, but on average across populations, we knew that it was. We got into this precision era where we sort of forgot that. We're like, oh, actually, the attribution model.
Precision, right? We thought we were in a precision era,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
So we followed it. It wasn't accurate, but it was precise. And we followed that. And even though it was modeled,
we trusted things like cookies, and we had these models for attribution, for MTA, and all these other things.
Which I think to a time they probably worked well, but once they scaled and sort of got out of control without the quality controls, it got worse. So now we're going a little bit back to the future, and we have to re-embrace this idea that most advertising, you can't know specifically, precisely where every single ad and how it affected every single person. You have to look at probabilistic. You have to look at populations. You have to understand that there's models involved. Everything just gets statistically significant. There's ranges of probabilities, and you look over the short and the long term together.
Well, this has been a great discussion. We'd love to get you back on the pod for long form, 60, 90-minute discussion on this. It's an incredible topic, and the previous episode we put out continues to get a lot of views. So thanks again for coming by, and I'm sure I'll see you in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I'd love to chat. When the quality paper comes out, I think that you'll appreciate a lot of the frameworks and principles, and then there'll be another great discussion from there.
Nice. Love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Rio.